Hello, this is the exact list that I showed you guys in video number 1 of this series. And guess what? Everything except one item is crossed off. That means this is the final video lesson from me on this particular series. I'm not a list deviator. I wrote the list in video number 1. I plan to stick to the list all through the video series. I'm not a list deviator. You guys are all list deviators. I've been noticing your comments and you're all list deviators. So in this lesson we will demonstrate how to create an Ajax and PHP driven conversation system that you can install into your user profile pages. You could say it is the Blab system extended. I also just tested the HTML5 markup for user.php file and it passes HTML5 validation nicely. And this conversation application is something that must be redesigned by you. And the programming of it must be enhanced by you if you wish to have a polished, complete conversation or timeline or wall system or whatever you have in your noodle. Now, even though the system I'm about to show you uses Ajax for all of its data transmissions, this system you're getting from me is very basic and made for educational purposes only, so keep that in mind. Now, just because this is my last Web Intersect social site building video does not mean this lesson series is stopping with me. And at the end of this video, I'm going to recommend a channel to you that you can subscribe to if you want to see enhancements or additions to this sort of website programming logic. He is a helpful English-speaking person, much like myself, gifted with code logic and design skills to bang out nice working applications that he can explain the inner workings of to people on video. So that's why I'm going to recommend that you subscribe to his channel. He also has existing video tutorials you may be interested in. And I already asked him about it, and he said that he'd be able to extend this lesson series. Now, to what extent or directions he'll go with it, I do not know, and that's up to him to ponder. So at the end of this video, I'll introduce you to him, and I would imagine that half of you already know who he is. So just because this is my last video of this particular series doesn't mean this series is actually ending with me. And since I already put in tutorial form all of the aspects that I promised you I would in video 1 of this series, my hands are clean and I feel good about my part coming to a stop here. Okay, so let's bang out this last little bit of logic, which is the conversation system. And first, I'll show you how it works live on the website. Now, since my little envelope is all blinky blinky, that means I have new notifications. And in the code examples that I'm going to offer you in this tutorial, you're going to see an example of how when somebody posts on your wall or your profile, timeline, whatever you want to call this stupid thing, when somebody posts, starts a conversation with you or whatever, you get a notification. And if I was to post on my own wall, say, I am doing great today, and then if I post that, right then, all 132 friends of mine, they just got a notification and they'll be all blinky blinky. And on their notifications page, when they click it, they'll see a little notification that somebody posted. So my last notification was Bobby Boy posted on Adam's profile, and if I click that, it takes me directly to that particular conversation. So if I was to go back to notifications and click one of these other ones, it takes me to a different part of my profile where that conversation resides right here. You see? So on the notifications page, when you click those links, they'll actually take you to that profile and that conversation, that particular conversation on the profile. Now here I am at Don's page, and I can, since I'm a friend of his, I can comment on his post and say, thanks Don, nice comment buddy, reply, and Ajax just pops it right in. It's already in the database and everything, and it says reply by you just now. And then I have a remove option if I want to remove that. So if I reload the page, you'll see it says reply by Adam and the time. Now, if you guys want to put the ago time, like if you want 10 seconds ago or 2 hours ago, or if you wanted to say 3 weeks ago if it happened a long time ago or whatever, I have a script for that already. It's called the Time Ago Programming OOP tutorial. That's at Develop PHP. So at Develop PHP, if you go into the PHP and MySQL video section, into the miscellaneous, the first video in the miscellaneous PHP and MySQL video tutorials is PHP convert MySQL timestamp to ago format OOP tutorial. So click on that, watch this tutorial, grab the code, and you'll have a way to convert all of these times to a go time. So that's why I just left it like this, because I already have the tutorial and the code for that waiting for you here, and you can apply it to your system. Alright, so basically you just have an Ajax driven conversation system that is tied to this notification system. Okay? Now let's discuss the code. Okay, the three files that you're going to get within this tutorial are the updated user.php, and in user.php you'll see that I only added just a few lines to that, and template status.php and status system.php. Template status.php is a file that you can include into your user.php that kind of modulates the whole conversation system if you prefer to work that way. It externalizes most of the conversation system, and I'll be explaining that file to you in a second. And also this CSS could also be externalized into an external CSS file, just like your style sheet. You can make a new style sheet called status.css and just put these few lines of CSS within that. It doesn't have to be direct here in your user.php script, but I just have it sitting direct in user.php. This is where you can tweak the CSS for the conversation system. So all I added to user.php was these lines of CSS, and then down in the HTML I added this one line, include once template status.php. So since that's all of the code that I added, you can wrap your head around that easy, so I won't explain any more about user.php since I added just those few lines of code. Now let's talk about template status.php. Now template status.php is a file that has some PHP in the top of it, then further down it has some JavaScript logic, and then it outputs some HTML. So basically all the HTML output that would come here is going to be embedded directly into your user.php right where this line is. Okay? So you'll have a div with an ID of status UI, which is short for status user interface. And if you look on the site or on your example site wherever you're building, you'll see that this box, this text area, and this post button are the user interface, the status user interface. Everything under that, all of the conversations that are listed out here, they reside within this status area div. So up in the PHP, the first thing we're doing is setting the variables to output the status user interface and the status list. And we make them empty at first, because if the user is not logged in, or if they're not a friend of that person, they won't see the text area and the post button to make a post on that person's profile. So the logic here is if isOwner is equals to yes on the user.php page, that means it's the profile owner, so he will see this text area and this button. That's the HTML that you feed that guy, whoever's the logged in user. And you can see this button is running a function called post to status, and it pretty much just takes whatever he writes in the text area and uses Ajax to post it to the PHP and MySQL side of your system. Then the next bit of logic is else. If it's not the owner of the page, you want to evaluate if the person is friend equals true. Then you give them this little bit of status, and actually this status area title does not belong, so you just have this text area and this button, which is very similar to the one you give the profile owner, but instead of being post type A, it's post type C in the database. Because remember, when we created the status table, we have post type A, B, and C. A is for if a profile owner is making a post on his own profile. C is for if a friend of that profile owner is making a new post on his friend's profile. And B is for all of the replies. All of the replies on any of the status posts are marked as type B. So you have A, B, and C type. So you're just giving people different types of HTML, and different variables in your JavaScript function can be laid in here according to whatever logic you want to lay out. Whoever the user is that happens to be viewing the page, if they have special privileges, if they're a friend, all of that logic can be listed out here. So no matter what those variables come out to be, whether the viewer is the profile owner, or if it's a friend, or if it's somebody that's not even logged in, you're going to select all of the status posts for the profile that the person is viewing. So you say select all from the status table where the account name equals the user's profile that the person is viewing, and type equals A, or the account name equals U and type equals C. So whether it's type A or type C, we're going to dig it out with this MySQL query. You can see I limit mine by 20. If you want to have a very, very long list of conversations that people can leave on their profiles, then you can make that limit whatever you want, or just take the limit off completely. Now, another interesting tutorial along these lines is in the JavaScript video section at Develop PHP, where I have here it is. You see it says JavaScript scroll tutorial, load dynamic content into page when user reaches bottom. So basically this tutorial right here will show you how to, when the user reaches the bottom of the page, boom, right there, you can load more content into any containers. Basically you can use Ajax to load a whole bunch of more page content into the page. So watch this tutorial if you like. And I noticed that Google+, I think Google+ and Facebook and Twitter and all of them use that sort of functionality now. They'll only load a certain amount of conversations or timeline into the page, but when you scroll to the bottom, more magically just loads in. And this tutorial can show you how to do that exact thing. So that's why I have mine just limited to 20, and you can handle it any way you like. You can take the limit off, or you can limit it to 20, and like I said, when the user scrolls to the bottom, you can load more things into dynamic containers on the page. So basically we're selecting the whole status list here, and within the while loop for gathering all of the data for those particular status posts is where you're also going to gather up any status replies. So these are only type A and C that you're querying out, but you also have to query all the B types of replies within this while loop for those respective posts. Because remember, type A and type C are the initial start of a conversation, the initial post. Type B are the replies. Now you also want to have some logic here that says if the author equals log username, person logged in, or if the account name is equal to the log username. So basically if a person viewing a conversation is the one that wrote that post, they'll be able to delete it. You want to give them a delete button to delete the whole entire conversation. Or if it's the owner of the profile, maybe he didn't start that conversation but he owns the profile, you want to give him the ability to also delete the whole conversation. So that's what this little bit of logic takes care of, and it creates a little status delete button here that runs a JavaScript function called delete status. Then, like I said, within this while loop you want to gather up any status replies. So you start a status replies variable here that will get appended to over and over again with all of the replies that happen to be found within the database for that particular conversation. So we can query all of the replies for a particular conversation by saying select all from the status table where original status ID equals this status ID that's coming through the loop, and type equals B, order by post date ascending. And you say if the reply num rows is greater than 0, then we're going to run an inner while loop to get all of the replies into this status replies variable. You can see we're appending using dot equals, and we're just putting a bunch of divs in place that are the HTML for all of the replies for whatever conversation that is. And within that while loop you also want to have the logic to give the person who wrote that reply the delete button for that reply, and also the account owner, whoever's profile that the reply is on. Whoever owns the profile, you always want to give them the delete buttons for everything. Then you can see right here, status replies variable is getting all the replies compounded into it. And you notice that when I'm making these divs, they all have unique IDs. So this one has an ID of reply underscore, and it'll be some number after the underscore. Whatever the status reply ID is will be attached to that ID. So this way, when Ajax or JavaScript needs to zap that div off of the page, JavaScript can easily target it by its ID. And they have a class just to style them the way you want them to look. That's what the class is for. And these are all the reply boxes, get the class of reply boxes, but they all have unique IDs. So outside of this little while loop, and this if condition, you're going to compound the main status list. So what this does is it puts all of the conversations and all of their replies into HTML format. And then under each conversation, towards the bottom, so if the person who's viewing this profile happens to be the friend of that person, or if the logged in user is viewing their own profile, then you want to have the text area that is for replying. This text area is for replying to the conversations. And you have a little button that says reply, and that runs a function called reply to status. So basically you're just cleverly querying all of the conversations, all the posts for that particular profile. And within that query's while loop, you're gathering up all of the replies also, because those have to be listed within the conversation. Now we can discuss the JavaScript that powers everything, and the JavaScript is connected to this status system.php file. So status system.php needs to live within your parsers folder. So don't forget to put status system.php within your parsers folder. Now template status.php is what's connected to that using Ajax. So you have functions post to status, reply to status, delete reply, and status max. Now I'll explain this status max just really quickly because it's very simple. Basically what this does is it makes sure that nobody can put more than 250 characters here when they're typing, or here. And if you don't want that in place, you can simply remove the status max. You can see right here, status max on key up event for these text areas. So on key up event we have status max function running. All you have to do is remove this whole event if you didn't want that in place. Just put it just like that, and there won't be any limit to the amount that people can write in. But you'd also have to change your field in your database to hold more than 255 varchar. I think it's set to varchar 255 right now, or maybe it's set to text. You want to set yours to text if you want to hold a lot more. And I just really put that in for educational purposes. That way, some of you guys might want to limit the amount that people can type into these text areas. Now this next JavaScript function is called delete reply, and you have to feed two arguments or pass two parameters to it, the reply ID and the reply box. Remember when I was telling you that all of these divs for the replies have a unique ID? That's basically what you're passing to this function. The reply ID and the identifier for the reply box, the div that holds that reply. So inside of delete reply, first thing you do is you can set up a confirm, and also you can delete this if you don't want to confirm. If you don't want a confirm box, just delete these 4 lines of code here, and the deletion will happen immediately. So you can see it's just the same kind of Ajax requests that we've been using the whole time. So you're posting to status system.php, which is inside of your PHP parsers folder, and what you're posting is two variables, I think. Action, delete reply. So you're posting action and reply ID to status system.php. And I'll show you. Its action is delete reply. So inside of status system, let's go to that. We have if post action is delete reply down here at the bottom. I'll discuss that with you right now. What we do is we check to see if the posted variable is set for reply ID, and make sure reply ID is not empty. So if it's not set, or if it's empty, we're going to exit this script immediately. Then we gather up the posted reply ID and we cleanse it through the preg replace function, making sure that it's nothing but numbers can be in that sequence of characters. And that is in a variable then called reply ID, nice and clean, so we can query that data against the database. And what this query is aimed to do is to check to make sure that the person deleting this reply is either the account owner or the person who wrote the reply. So within a while loop, we can gather out the account name and the author for that reply in the database. Then we can evaluate to see if author equals log username, or if the account name equals log username, then we can successfully delete that reply for those people, because it's either the person that wrote the reply or it's the person who owns the profile that that reply is living on. Those are the only people that should be able to delete that reply. And that's a simple query that says delete from status where ID equals this reply ID. And you can actually put a limit 1 on that. Then after it's deleted from the database, you echo back to the Ajax delete OK. Now when delete OK gets back to the Ajax request, what we're doing is we're saying if response text equals delete OK, then that reply box style display equals none. Basically remove it from the page. Else, if the Ajax response text does not equal OK, you're just going to alert the Ajax response text to the user. That way they can see whatever kind of problem it is. So you see, that's not too hard. It's pretty simple. Let's collapse that one back up. So I've explained status max and delete reply. Now delete status is very similar, but basically this one helps the person to delete the whole conversation. And this works in a similar way. You're passing the status ID to this delete status function, and you're passing the status box, basically the div that holds that post and all of its replies. There's going to be a div that holds that post and all of its replies for each conversation listed. And that's what the status box is. It holds basically each conversation. That way when that conversation, that whole little thread is being deleted by a user that has privileges to delete it, you want to make sure that you can wipe it off from the page, and that's why we're passing this parameter to it of status box. And that represents the div that holds the whole conversation and all of its replies. So we do a similar thing where you have a confirm box, and like I said, you don't need that. And then after the confirm, you just have an Ajax request once again to status system.php. And this time you're posting the action of delete status. Instead of delete reply, the action is delete status. And we're passing the status ID variable. So let's go into status system, the PHP script that's parsing this Ajax. And this one was delete reply, so we don't need to look at that anymore since we explained it all already. Here we have delete status. So if is set post action and post action is equal to delete status, we run this code. And it's basically the same thing. It's the same exact kind of logic and PHP as you saw down here. Okay, it's the same exact logic. The only difference in this little bit of PHP is right here. You're going to delete from status where OSID equals the status ID. Now what that delete logic helps you do is to delete all of the items from the database that are associated with that particular conversation. So not only the original status post will be deleted, but all of the replies that are connected to that original status post. Basically the whole conversation will be deleted in this one line. That's the only difference between this and the PHP that I just explained a second ago for deleting the replies. Okay, so I'm not going to explain that very in depth. That's the only difference between that code and the code down here. Okay, we only have two more JavaScript functions to explain. Function reply to status and function post to status. Now reply to status is the function that fires off when somebody is replying, making a new comment into an existing conversation. So you want to make sure that you pass to this function the conversation ID, or I call it the status ID, the username, whoever's profile the conversation happens to be on, the text area that the user is typing into to make the reply, and the button that is associated to that reply box. So those are the four arguments that get passed through the reply to status function. Now let's open that up and explain it. First thing we do is create a variable that grabs the value, whatever they typed in, to that text area. You have that in a variable called data, and you say if data equals empty, then you alert type something first, weenus, and then return false, because you don't want this code to run if the data is empty. So you say return false right there, and that stops this function from running any further. Then we're going to target the reply button by its unique HTML ID on the page. So within the HTML tag, it's going to have a unique reply button ID for this status ID. So you target that reply button and you disable it. Now here is our Ajax request. that sends the reply to the status system.php script for parsing. So you're creating your Ajax object, and here's your onReadyStateChange function. And this Ajax request is sending the variables of action, and that has a value of status reply. So the action is status reply. The status ID is equal to whatever dynamic status ID is being passed to this function. The user variable is whoever's profile is being viewed, and the data variable is the value of the text area where they're typing in. So status system.php is going to be ready to intake those 4 variables for the action of status reply. So let's go look at that. Here we have status reply. So if is set post action, and if the post action variable is equal to status reply, we're going to run all of this code here. The first thing we're going to do is make sure the data is not empty. That's what this little bit of code takes care of. Then we're going to clean the posted variables coming in. So these are all of the posted variables. We have the status ID, we have the user, and then we have the data. Now what I'm doing is I'm running the data through HTML entities. And HTML entities is a PHP function that will take things like this. So for instance, if I type in script into the text area that is the reply box, if I type in script and say I'm a hacker and I want to put in window.location some evil place, okay? So basically, if you want to not allow people to put code in, like if they want to underline something, you don't let them use tags and allow those tags to process. So basically what you do is use HTML entities, and what that'll do is it'll take this code and it'll make it something that looks like this. Instead of that left bracket, it'll be and LT semicolon, and then the right bracket turns to and RT semicolon. So basically, instead of these brackets for the tags, this is the string that will go into your database. And then here, I'll show you what I mean. Let me just go right now and I'll show you. I'll show you the purpose why I'm using HTML entities. So if I'm on my profile, and let's say I'm trying to hack this little system by typing in the script tag, and I want to put in some malicious code that will navigate any user when this page is loaded back to my website or something like that. So I can put www.adamkhoury.com or whatever. Alright, so if as the programmer, if you're not changing these characters to their HTML entity equivalents, then this script will hack your system. Basically, if I post this, all that happens is their hack attempt or their code is displayed in their post, and it doesn't process at all. So if you didn't use HTML entities on this text, what would happen is people would actually be redirected to adamkhoury.com directly when they come to my profile here at Web Intersect. You don't want that to happen, and a lot of people can put a lot of malicious JavaScript into your website if you allow them to. You don't even want to allow them to use HTML code here to format things or anything like that. So changing these symbols to their HTML entity equivalents helps your system stay safe from JavaScript hacks. That's why I'm running data through HTML entities. I'm also running data through MySQL real escape string. What that does, it'll put an escape character before any of the single quotes or double quotes. And MySQL real escape string further secures your data before it goes into the database. And you don't have to worry about running account name or OSID through MySQL real escape string, because you know for sure that after this posted data runs through preg replace, there won't be anything but letters and numbers in here, and there won't be anything but numbers in here. Actually, this doesn't need an I, because this should only be numbers in the ID. The account name will have letters and numbers. That's why you see me not running this data through MySQL real escape string function, because there's no way that any harmful characters can be in it after it runs through this preg replace. Okay, after we clean the posted variables and get the data ready to go into the database, we're going to make sure the account name actually exists. So the profile that is being posted on, you want to make sure that profile and that person actually exists in your system. So we're going to say select count ID from the users table where username equals account name and activated equals 1. And basically this little bit of code just evaluates whether that account actually exists in your system. If it doesn't exist, then you're going to echo back to Ajax account no exist and then exit the script. But if everything is cool, then you're going to insert the status reply post into the database now. And that's very simple. We just have the SQL syntax of insert into the status table, original status ID field, into the account name field, into the author field, the type field, the data field, and the post date field. All of those fields will get populated with all of this data right here. Then you run that query, and then you get the ID for that inserted data. Basically, the reply ID is right here. And you want to send that back to Ajax. That way the person can instantly delete it if they would like to without page refresh. So right when it is posted magically to the page using Ajax, you have to send that ID back. That way it can be associated in the delete function. That's the only reason we're using MySQL insert ID, to get the ID for that inserted reply. Alright, so once it's inserted, then we're going to insert notifications for everybody in the conversation except the person typing. You don't have to give a notification to the person doing the replying because they're the ones doing the replying. They know it just happened. What you want to do is update everybody else in the conversation by sending them a notification. So whoever's part of that conversation is going to get a notification inserted into the notifications table for them, letting them know about what just happened. And you can write whatever you want into the app variable. I just wrote status reply, and then the note can be constructed any way you like, and it would be helpful in your note on the notifications page if you put a link to wherever this conversation is happening, and make sure that you put the little reference to the exact status ID for that conversation so it snaps to that point on the page. Okay? So it's important to put the reference for the status ID on that link. Here, let me just show you what I mean. On the notifications page, you can see you click to view that conversation, you see? And it'll go to that point on the page. It won't start at the top. So if it started at the top, the person might not know what the hell conversation that we're trying to be notified about. You know what I mean? And then we finally send back to Ajax a delimited string. You can see I have this string has two pieces of data in it, and they're separated by that little bar. Basically, I'm just sending the reply ID back on the right side of that bar. On the left side of that bar, the string reply OK, and then I exit the script. So Ajax is waiting for that reply. So what we do in Ajax is we say if Ajax return equals true, we're going to gather up the data array, which is that delimited string that I was just talking about that had the bar in it. On the right side of the bar, we had the ID for the reply ID. On the left side of the bar, remember, we had OK. So we can just say if data, the first part of the array, is reply OK, then we can make a variable out of the second part of the array, a variable called reply ID. Now the data that you're going to display to the person using Ajax when they make a reply is not actually from PHP, because you already have the access to that data right here. So you don't have to bring that back from PHP when JavaScript already has it available within this function. So we're going to use some replacing functions on that. So basically what this line is doing is JavaScript's equivalent to the PHP HTML entities function. Basically you're taking this character and you're making its HTML entity replacement. That's all you're doing there. Then all you do is append more data into this status conversation, and you put the reply div directly into the bottom. Then you can make the reply button for that conversation enabled again. This line enables the reply button again. This line clears out the text field or the text area that they were typing into. That way the same data is not in there when they successfully reply. You want to clear that box out so they can maybe make another comment or whatever. And so that's how that whole function works. And we only have one left, which is the post to status. Now this is the one which is the main conversation creating function. So if I'm on my profile, I'm going to create a new post, a new status. I feel funny. Post. Now what I did was just made this function run, post to status. And this function will also run in this case. I'll show you. Let's see if I go to Khoury and I want to say, "Hi, Carl. I'm making a new conversation, a new post on his profile." I can post it and there it is. I just made this post to status function run again. So this runs to create post types of A and C, the main posts, the main conversation starter types. And the guts of this function work exactly, almost exactly the way the guts of the reply to status function work. A post to status takes in the action variable, the type variable. The type will be either A or C, the user variable, meaning whoever's profile that the viewer is on, and the text area. You can get the data by saying text area.value. That takes everything typed into the text area and puts it in a variable called data. You can evaluate to see if that is empty. If it is, you say alert, type something first, weenus, and then return false, so this code does not run. If there is data, then you want all this code to run. First thing you're going to do is say status button disabled equals true. You're going to disable the post button just until the Ajax request and data return comes back and everything. Then you can enable it again, and we do that right here. Alright, so we have our Ajax request set up once again, and this Ajax is posting to PHP parsers status system.php once again, and the variables are action, which if you scroll up top you'll see the action could only be status post in either case. See, status post for either A or C type. That action variable is going to represent status post. Type is going to represent either A or C. User is the user's profile that we're on, and text area. So action variable is populated with the value of dynamic action. The type is going to be sent, the user, and the data. So let's go into status system and let's find that. If is set post action and post action is equal to status post. If that is the case, then all of this code right here is going to run. Now it's very similar to the code that we had for the status replies, but in this one we're going to insert notifications at the bottom here to all friends of the post author. So basically, when I went and created this post saying hi to Carl, all 132 of my friends just got a notification letting them know that I posted something on Carl's profile. So this one works a little bit differently. When in the status replies, we're only giving notifications to the individuals that are part of the conversation and not everybody's friends. But when people make new posts, either type A or C, we can notify all of their friends because their friends might be interested in what they're saying around the website. Okay, so first thing we do within this logic is we make sure the post data is not empty. That code takes care of that. Then we're going to make sure the type of post is either A or C. So if post type is not equal to A, and if post type is not equal to C, actually this should be OR. I don't know why I have an AND operator there. That should be the OR operator, not the AND operator. So if post type is not equal to A, or if post type is not equal to C, then we're going to exit this script altogether. Then we're going to clean all of the posted variables that will interact with the database. So once again, we're running preg replace over the post type variable, the post user variable, and we're running data through HTML entities again. So that cleanses your data, gets it ready for database storage. Then we're going to make sure the account name exists. Then we're going to insert the status post into the database now. So we insert into the status table account name, author, type, data, and post date fields, all of this information. So all of these fields within that database table will get all of this specific information. Then we're going to run that query to insert that data, and we're going to get the insert ID once again. That way we can send this status or this conversation ID, this status ID, back to Ajax. And we're doing that so when people want to instantly delete something they just wrote a second ago, that the remove button is ready to go for them. Now what this update query does is it takes the row that you just inserted and it makes its OS ID field equal to the inserted ID. Then you want to count the posts of type A for the person and evaluate the count. And basically what you're doing here is this code is checking to see if they have 10 or more posts of type A, which my system is programmed to limit how many conversations they can have, to limit everybody in my example system to only having 10 conversations that they started on their own profile. But pay attention, if you want to allow your system to allow way more than that, just remove all of the code that I have blue right now. My code is set up to delete their oldest automatically. So they can just keep making new conversations. They don't have to delete any. My system is going to auto flush. I even wrote you a comment. If they have 10 or more posts of type A, delete their oldest post if you want a system that auto flushes the oldest conversations. You can auto flush for posts type C and B also if you wish. Alright, so that's what that code does, and you can change that to any numbers you like. Now we're finally going to insert notifications to all friends of the post author. Now to do that, I'm just going to run two queries that are going to gather all of the friends into an array. Then I'm going to run a for loop over that array, and for each friend gets a notification inserted into the system. That way they have a blinky envelope next time they come to the site and they can see what their friends were doing. Then after the inserting takes place, to notify all the friends, and we're going to echo back to Ajax post OK on the left side of the bar, and on the right side of the bar we're going to echo back the status ID, basically the conversation ID. Alright, so that's how all of that PHP works. Now this insert notifications to all friends is a very important piece of code that you're going to use maybe many times on your website. You might have, when somebody changes their profile photograph, their avatar, you might want to put a notification to all their friends. Hey, your buddy just changed his profile picture, go check it out. That's a good time to use code like this, and that would go into your photosystem.php script. So you see, this code could be used in many places where you want to notify all of the friends of a particular user of some action that their buddy just made, or some interaction that they had on the website. Okay, so I'll collapse that back up, and that's pretty much everything in all three of the files. That's the whole conversation system. So you can see within 6 hours we achieved a pretty good level of logic and software programming just within 6 measly hours. So now you have all of these systems in place, and let me introduce you to the person that I think would be best suited to extend this series. Mr. Sean Lloyd, and I'll put a link to his YouTube channel down in the video description. That way you guys can just check out the description text for this video and click that link and go straight to his channel and subscribe. Just like this. Subscribe. Bing. Now I'll see all of the videos that Mr. Sean Lloyd puts out. Now I've talked to him about extending the Web Intersect tutorial series, and he said he'd be game for doing that, but I don't know to what extent that he will enhance or extend the series. So that'll be totally up to him, and if you want to subscribe to his channel, you'll see any future videos that he puts out, and you can see the videos that he puts out are all along the lines of the things that you guys want to learn anyway, so it's not, even if he doesn't put out any tutorials for the Web Intersect series to extend it, you'll get good knowledge from this guy. Now before I go, I want to discuss how instant chat or video chat is built, because a lot of you seem to want that feature built into your website. You could script a very simple server polling mechanism using Ajax was just a short interval timed request to PHP to see if new things were added to the data storage. And if new things are found within the data storage, then you display those new things to the user. So it's a short interval timed Ajax request that just checks the database frequently to see if there's any updates. But using that method, if your site gets over a few hundred users, your server will be continuously stressed and go down frequently. So for a large-scale site that has many simultaneous users, web developers can apply socket servers. HTML5, JavaScript, PHP, Python, Java, and many other web technologies are equipped to create socket servers and handle socket interaction. For instance, in the modern web, one could create an HTML-based socket connection software where HTML and JavaScript are the client side, and PHP and MySQL make up the socket server. Or you can establish a Python socket server that you can use JavaScript and HTML5 to connect to. And alternately, you can just go grab a socket-based server software that was written by somebody else that's made for multiplayer games and highly interactive social applications. SmartFox Server is one such framework among many that makes life easier for you until you learn socket programming from scratch using the modern technologies that you like best. So you don't have to build your socket server and your client scripts from scratch. You can get a pre-existing framework or software that handles all of that already. Now, things you would want to use socket connections for are instant text chat software within your social network, video chat software, social multiplayer games or massively multiplayer online games, and anything that requires instant open data flow between the server and the client, which the client is the browser software. So that's how people who are developing social applications online that are involving a lot of simultaneous users that need instant data flow. So that's how you can set up things like instant chat, video chat, or social multiplayer games without bogging down your server if you happen to have a whole lot of simultaneous users on the system. But a lot of people like to use polling. There's something called long polling too, and you can dig into all of that. But I wouldn't recommend polling if you're going to have any more than a few hundred users. If you have maybe 10 users, polling is okay. And hey, what do you know? The entire series is complete. Everything that I promised you from the beginning has been covered. I am not a list deviator. The lesson plan that we promised from the beginning is what we have delivered. We hope you've enjoyed this Web Intersect 2.0 social network production training series.